I'd like to welcome our panel moderator today, Evgenia Voroboyova. So thank you, Evgenia. The virtual stage is yours.
Thanks a lot, Alison, for giving us the guidelines for the sessions as well. It's very, very important. And yeah, let's get started. I also welcome everyone who joined today's sessions. We'll have the panel discussion on the topic of mentorship in academia. And probably I will start with just brief introduction of myself, and then we'll continue with the discussion. My name is Evgenia, and now I'm connected from Switzerland. I live in Lausanne, and I work in a small startup in the area of green hydrogen and sustainable energy. I work there as a technical lead. Before joining the startup, I also did my PhD at ETH in Zurich, and then I also pursued my academic career with postdoctoral studies for 2 years. I switched a bit the topic from thermal catalysis to electrocatalysis, and yes, now I'm here combining actually both fields in my current job. And in parallel to all of this, I'm also a co-founder of a mentorship program for early career researchers in STEM. And that's why the topic of mentorship in academia is quite important for me personally. And what we will be talking today about is, of course, the whole discussion would be based on the personal and professional experience of the panelists, and would be evolving around the mentor-mentee relationship and how actually having a mentor could benefit for the mental health in academia. We would have around 1 hour and a half, and I would encourage all the participants, all the listeners, the audience to join our conversation and not to wait till the end to ask you questions, but please feel free to raise your hand and just unmute yourself and ask what is on your mind. It would be cool to have it as an interactive session, not just us from our side talking to you. It's usually the most interesting conversation happens like this. Well, let's get started. Maybe let's start. For the start, I would like to ask the panelists, tell us a little bit about yourself, your academic journey, and where are you standing in the topic of mental health. Who would like to start? Just feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead.
I could start things off. Hi, everyone. My name is Annie Reyes. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at UC San Diego and incoming staff at the Cleveland Clinic within the Epilepsy Center. By training, I'm a clinical neuropsychologist, but also licensed as a clinical psychologist. Mostly my research is focused in epilepsy and Alzheimer's disease. And mentorship has been kind of a very important kind of core center of not just my career, but what I do and what I've gained from it. I come from underrepresented by background in biomedical sciences and medicine. Immigrant, English as a second language, coming from kind of various disadvantaged backgrounds and multiple identities. And as a first person going off to college and graduate school, mentoring really formed that core. We enter school not necessarily knowing what is it that we're doing. So really having what we call kind of a team of mentors, people at multiple stages. Kind of we think about mentorship from up, but we could have peer mentors, right? So throughout my career, that has been extremely important to me, and for that reason, I have developed several initiatives centering on mentoring, providing this resource. So currently, I'm the co-founder, and co-director of the mentorship program for the Society for Black Neuropsychology. So that's one of the major initiatives that I have going on.
Thanks a lot. Wow, you also developed mentorship program. That's amazing. Cool. Thank you. Would like to continue? Melanie, Annie?
Great. So I warned everyone that I'm long-winded, so if I'm being extra abrupt, that's actually why. So hello, everyone. My name is Melanie, and see her. My PhD is actually in educational psychology, and I'm currently the Associate Director of Student Experience at the University of Guelph. I'm actually a neuroscience dropout, so it was really neat to be among the ones who made it. And so everything you say, I'm always gonna be nodding my head furiously because, you know, if I had known about people like you, and if I had known a bit about the fact that I might possibly belong, I probably would have stayed. And I switched over to educational psychology because when I was in my first year of master's in neuroscience, I was told by the only, I actually don't want the outcome, a person who matched my identity in one way, the only one that was in the whole department, that teaching is a punishment for being a bad researcher. And I thought I was going to be a professor to teach university students. Sorely mistaken. Anyway, so then I thought I got it okay with educational psychology, and in fact I did. And so in terms of mentorship, it's funny because I did drop out of my program, but my supervisor was great. He was always nice, always forgiving, but I had so much stigma around my own struggles with mental health, which I'll get into later. And I also really had imposter syndrome, but it was 2006. So I had not heard that term. And I was the only Black person in the entire department of any kind. And yeah, there's a lot of pressure. And so I ended up doing my PhD about decreasing the stigma of mental illness in higher education. And so when it comes to supervision and mentorship, now in my role as the Associate Director of Student Experience, among other things, I got to be in charge of leading an approach to supervision, mentorship, and coaching within this department. And I recently created a 12-hour online course, which I'll put in the chat, about cultivating well-being in the workplace. So I think I'll leave it at that.
Wow, thanks a lot. So impressive background. Thank you. Andrea, Haley, would like to continue? Yeah, Andrea, go ahead if you would like.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the kind invitation today. I'm delighted to be on this panel and sharing this stage with esteemed colleagues, and hoping to learn from you as well today. So I am a medical doctor. I'm actually the medical director of the Tropical Disease Unit at Toronto General Hospital, and I'm an associate professor in the Department of Medicine at the University of Toronto. And in my clinical practice, I exclusively see patients who are ill after returning from travel or newly migrated to the country. And my research is around interrogating the impacts on mobile populations of neglected tropical diseases. And so much of that work has been situated in under-resourced and resource-constrained LMICs abroad. I undertook my medical training after completion of an undergraduate degree and then a graduate degree in parasitology. And again, that was the sort of impetus behind pursuing a career in the neglected tropical disease, sort of understanding how health disparities are driven by global inequities, and that every disease ultimately ends up being one of poverty and disadvantage, and really trying to appreciate how social location influences all aspects of one's existence, including healthcare seeking, health outcomes, etc. And so when I finished my medical training at the University of Toronto and postdoctoral fellowships, I joined the faculty. And during my sort of tenure, early years as a faculty member, noticed that the trainees who were coming through on the clinical services and rotating, and also the trainees who were approaching me for supervision and mentorship actually didn't reflect our national fabric at all. Right, there was very limited diversity in the trainee pool, and so at that point, this was around 2018. I started to work very closely with Ike Okafor in the Office of Access and Outreach, as it's now named, but it was originally just part of the Tamworth Faculty of Medicine, and he has started a program called the Community of Support, which is a Pathways program to facilitate mentorship and sponsorship and opportunity for those who have been historically underrepresented in STEM due to manifold factors, as you are all aware. And so through that work, I have trained and mentored many students in research and in clinical medicine. And then more recently, last year, Ike and I collaborated to launch a program called the Mentor to Mentor program, which is a training initiative for other principal investigators. Again, to assist them with embedding the principles of EDIIA into their training programs, into their research, and as a way to diversify the training pool that they are serving. And again, the idea behind all of this is, you know, to better serve the populations that we are being trained to serve, right, in our communities, and you know, the best science and medicine has to offer is going to be so much more impactful when individuals are represented in the workforce. So I will leave it at that and hand the mic over to Haley. Again, thank you so much for inviting me.
Thanks a lot, Andrea. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Haley Vecchiarelli. I am currently a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Victoria, which is on unceded Lekwungen territory, including the Songhees and Esquimalt peoples. I'm here today, I think, because this is a topic I'm passionate about. So, and I'm very grateful to be on the panel with people who are also passionate and skilled in this, and grateful to be able to hopefully give some advice and learn from the rest of our panelists. I am a international graduate, or I was an international graduate student in Canada. I was a first-gen graduate student, and so it's been really important for me to use whatever accidental knowledge I acquired throughout my training, and give that back to community members who maybe also are navigating this for the first time. And so in my graduate and postdoctoral training, I've ran a lot of workshops around demystifying the scholarship application process, things like equity, running equity, diversity, and inclusion groups at different levels, and also just trying to help make everyone feel like they belong in these spaces. But we know that these are, you know, capitalist colonial enterprises, so there's a tension there. And yeah, so I'm excited to have some conversations today.
Thanks a lot, Haley. Yeah, it's thanks a lot for the brief introduction of yourself and telling about your journey, and see a lot of discussions about mentorship in the sense that to help other people, to develop other people, and it's very good. It's something that, you know, unites also all of us. I would like to maybe ask you, what, in your opinion, would be the most important qualities of a mentor? Annie, would you like to start?
Yeah, I could start that. So I think first, you know, especially when we think about diversifying the field, whether it's individuals from underrepresented backgrounds, women, kind of all the different facets of diversity. One of the important things that mentors need to understand is that most likely the mentee you're going to be working with may look very different from you. They may have very different walks of life, may come from a very different background. So because of that, I think there is an aspect of flexibility, an aspect of really being culturally sensitive, particularly to the needs of that trainee, and understanding that perhaps what you needed when you were a mentee, and although I'd say, you know, people say that you continue to forever be a mentee, regardless of where you are in your career, maybe look very different from what you need. And then if you're actually working with multiple students, every student is different. And I think we have this kind of idea of a cookie cutter kind of approach to mentorship. And I think that's really probably where we go wrong, is that if we really get to know our mentees, the students we're working with, we're going to understand that they have very specific needs, right? And we may not know those needs until we actually ask them, right? So being flexible about your approach to mentoring, making sure that the approach that you're taking is specific to the student you're working with. Perhaps you're working with a student who is a parent, right, and has responsibilities with caretaking, and perhaps that from a financial perspective, that student may need actually more than another student who doesn't have caregiving responsibility, or perhaps who doesn't have responsibility with taking care of the home, family members, and so forth. Then you might have students with disabilities, right? And there are some disabilities that we actually don't know about them until we are made aware. So having that flexibility is so important to make sure that you're meeting the needs of the trainee. Another thing in terms of the culturally kind of sensitive approach to mentoring is kind of understanding that every student is going to have a different path. There's a lot of mentors that are kind of known for wanting to create carbon copies of themselves, and may get upset if a student decides to go to industry and not follow the academic route, right? Or, as Melanie was mentioning, there's some students that say, hey, this is not the path I'm taking. I want to take another path. So making sure that you are supporting whatever your student decides to do and looking for the resources. Another thing that I also want to mention is, even as a clinical psychologist, I wasn't trained to address the mental health needs of my students, right? And if we think about all the other disciplines, a lot of mentors are not being trained to do that. A lot of mentors are not being trained of how to run a lab, how to run a clinic, how to run these things, right? So with that being said, it's like looking for the resources in order to do that, right? Especially when it comes to the mental health piece. We're not saying that mentors are supposed to be therapists, because, we're not, right? Unless you're a clinical psychologist. But in that sense, that's also a conflict of interest. But knowing where to look for resources, because you want to make sure that you connect your students with the resources on campus, making sure that you connect the students with other mentors that may perhaps be from the same identity as the student that are going to fulfill those needs. So seeing how every student is different, every student have different needs, that means that you want to be flexible with your approach to mentorship. Make sure that you have as many resources as possible and have the support from your department, have the support from your chair, because we want to make sure that we are encouraging students to follow the path in biomedical sciences, and to increase diversity. That's what's going to have to happen, is that we need to make sure that we in creating a very inclusive environment that is open-minded, that's open to students for different walks of life, different backgrounds, different abilities, and connecting them with the resources that they need, and making sure that we're supporting them with whatever path they decide to take.
Yeah, thank you, Annie. It's very important point you brought, is to being actually open to other people and not just to actually teach how to live, but actually given the opportunity and given the resources for it. It's very, very cool. Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add or relate to what Annie just said? Does it resonate with you? Just unmute yourself and feel free to talk.
I'll just add that I'm going to put a section from that course in in the chat again, just so it's closer by in terms of the part about leading a team.
Thank you.
I would just add, I agree with everything that Annie said, and in addition to sort of meeting students where they're at, right, and not forcing a particular role or particular opportunity, understanding that individuals with varying family commitments, travel time, etc., are going to impact a student's ability to engage in sort of the traditional academic models, like the courses, summer research projects that require full-time commitment, a PhD, for example. These are all things that have a pretty defined sort of time commitment involved, and just being cognizant of the fact that many students are going to be seeking opportunities that are more short-term or more amenable to remote work. And so just having that, again, that flexibility that Annie mentioned, to be able to offer a range of opportunities that is going to enhance your ability to diversify your training pool. And then within that, sort of maximizing opportunities for accrual of that academic currency, right? So for example, research-based courses that have historically always been situated in wet labs, maybe there's a way to port that over to a remote piece of work, like a literature synthesis, for example, a systematic, something that the student can work on, chip away at from afar, especially if they've got family commitments and can't easily access, say, the downtown campus. The other thing I wanted to mention was just my own personal philosophy is around recruiting, and it's recruiting for skills and attributes rather than according to status quo. So I don't even look at transcripts and I'll look at GPAs, right? I recruit for skills. And, you know, there are many you know, activities and life experiences that will impart the requisite skills of, say, leadership and teamwork and even teaching ability, right? If somebody's worked in the retail sector or the service sector, perhaps they've trained other more junior employees, right, on how to operate the store or whatever it is. Coaching, right? Coaching varsity sports teams or high school teams, tutoring, babysitting. These are all activities in which many people might have engaged because they have been remunerative rather than being able to access closed networks offering paid research opportunities, right? So, you know, I look for the skills. I don't look for status quo. I definitely don't recruit according to status quo. And then the other thing I will just mention, again, it dovetails with something Annie was saying, is just, you know, building that trust with your mentees. So, you know, for me, that's predicated upon expressions of solidarity, vulnerability, sharing. So really being honest and transparent about the hardships, the challenges. Annie, you mentioned having the support of the chairs. That is sometimes challenging, right? We exist in a patriarchal structure that benefits those in power. And sometimes some of the things that we're doing in this work are going to be antithetical to maintenance of that power structure, right? So just being aware of, you know, that you are going to face hardship and challenges in doing some of this work and being open and honest about it, demystifying these conversations, I think is an important step. And then, of course, you know, celebrating diversity in all of its forms. I sort of, you know, just thinking about social location, the Progress Candel's factor. So Progress was developed by the WHO. It's illustrated in their Handbook for Health Inequality Monitoring. It stands for, it's an acronym, Progress. So place of residence, religion, ethnicity, gender/sex, religion, educational attainment, social capital, socioeconomic status. And then during my work with the WHO in COVID, we expanded it to include Candels, which would include citizenship, age, neurodivergence, and neuroatypicality, disability, and language fluency. Again, and then size and body habitus. These are all ways by which individuals can be marginalized, right, in an academic environment. And so just being aware of that and trying to recruit for maximal diversity, because your decision making, your outputs, the programs that you build are going to be that much stronger for it.
Thanks a lot, Andrea. There's one of the things that particularly resonate with me is when you discussed about the trust which is built in the mentor-mentee relationship. It's also, so I'm also studying the coaching, and this is one of the most important things, and is actually to build the partnership relation, not with the different status. And that is what, in my opinion, creates the psychological safety for mentee as well, to openly talk which challenges you have or anything else to discuss. It's fully with you here. I would like then to ask you if you can share some particular experience or situation from your experience when this mentorship relation actually helped your career or maybe pivoted your career, something maybe memorable you can share with me and the audience. Yeah, who would like to start? Melanie, would you like?
Sure, yeah. So I'll
Mhm.
start again with solutions, and then I'll talk about a time that didn't happen and a time that did happen. So I'll say three things that I would say that anyone who wants to be a mentor or anyone who has been given the role of a supervisor should do. First is pursue diverse approaches to two things, to supervision and to feedback. When I say feedback, I mean both receiving and acting on feedback as well as giving feedback. A lot of folks don't realize that there are diverse approaches to those things, or that the methods that they learned accidentally don't actually work for most people. The second is cultivate two things, self-awareness and cultural humility. And I've got some books that I can show. I'll put it in the chat as well. Folks are like, how do I do that? And then the third thing is what you just mentioned, which is to find your people. Or if you are uncomfortable with that, or it's not your discipline, maybe you can think of it as modeling collaboration, because we know that the number one predictor of happiness is a sense of social support. And so, if you are somebody who has been supervised by someone who is really isolated, like, it's really awful. But then you also learn that that is the norm. And so, but if you feel a sense of responsibility for the trainees who you are leading, then you could think of it, like I said, as modeling collaboration, modeling growing that support network where your people may not be particularly in your discipline or have the same role as you, but have the same mindset about the work that you're doing. So I'll say that I think I already mentioned the one where it didn't go well. I ended up dropping out of neuroscience. And I picked that example because my supervisor, like I said, was really nice. But my supervisor was also the dean, and I was very scared of him. And I had gotten into the program late, and I was carrying a scholarship and therefore a lot of guilt about what I didn't know. As a punishment thing is the story, one of the stories I tell. The other story about that is that I was, my project was about binocular vision, and we were trying to separate, seeing in the left eye, seeing the right eye. We're trying to separate as far as possible. Where can we still see things in 3D? And that was great, except I didn't know that I actually have really poor binocular vision, like below average. And that's because I have not one, but two lazy eyes, which is 100% of my eyes. And so I didn't know that actually until much, much later when I did a different master's degree. Actually, no, it was a PhD, and I had received an external scholarship and had a little money left over. And I said, I'm gonna go get some laser eye surgery. And then they had me sign off. And I said, what's this? And they said, oh, just to confirm that you already have one lazy eye. And I said, okay, I guess I know now. And then they gave me another piece of paper and said, just to confirm that you also know that you have another lazy eye. And signed off. It made sense to me. But because, those diverse approaches to feedback, right, were not established, even really nice people can make mistakes in nice people. And I really couldn't face the fact, especially when I was carrying the responsibility of representation in my community, that there was something that I just couldn't do, right? I also didn't know the language of imposter syndrome. I didn't know it occurred to me, right? And so this is why I say that, if I think if me and my supervisor had that kind of support, things might have turned out differently. Do I regret it? No, it's a great story. But if I'm thinking about someone else who really does want that career in that field, I think it's a good opportunity. So the example of great supervision would be my last supervisor. This was the AVP academic at Western University. And she was so great that she lost me. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So a lot of you are starting to talk about the fact that, the people who you supervise may not actually pursue the same path as you. And this supervisor was the first person in my life to not only recognize that and affirm that, but to actually help that happen for me. And I remember when I explained what I wanted to do next, she said, "Oh, it sounds like you're kind of stuck, aren't you?" I said, "Yes." Because I had all the credentials. I'd gone to all the professional development things. I had done everything. I'd made those connections. My CV was just like creaking over the weight of all the things that I had on it. And yet still I couldn't get where I needed to get. And so what that supervisor did for me was open doors that seemed to be closed. And of course, that kind of, that person have it using their position to benefit somebody who actually wanted to do something differently, ended up being how I got into my current position that I love. And it actually made that I was actually turning away from academia. But because she affirmed that choice in me and allowed me to make my own decisions about what was best for me and the impact that I wanted to have, I was able to flourish and then give back to this side of the house by other things I do. So for example, I also do a lot of mental health literacy work for supervisors, actually in a lot of intercultural leadership and that kind of anti-racist leadership as well, for all sorts of supervisors, including those who lead labs. And so, but that's because I have that well-being, because of I'm in the path that I actually chose for myself.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. You also brought a very interesting point, like of the skill of a mentor. It's actually open the doors and also remind you that you can make your own decisions. You can live your own life, not like blindly follow someone. And this is also very important. Sometimes we are in this turbulence of events and we blindly like flow without standing our ground and understanding, no, I want to do this. This is very, very precious. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Haley, would you like to continue?
Yeah, I think I want to follow through on the topic that was brought up in the last question about trust and building trust and what happens when trust is lost between a mentor and a mentee. With myself as the mentee in this case, one of my previous supervisors, I was in grad school. I was, by all accounts, killing it, like great CV, doing the work, really involved in my community. And I hated coming into work. I had to sit and think about why that was. And I realized it was because I felt unsafe. And I felt unsafe both intellectually and physically. And this is because there were other people in the research group who had, so I'm allergic to laboratory animals, which is hard when you do laboratory animal-based research. And my solution to the problem was, okay, tell me if you're going to have laboratory animals in the space and I'll leave. You just let me know before you bring them in. And that way I don't have to take, a ton of allergy meds, which affects cognitive processing. And there was a member of our lab team who just refused, who was like, that is too much onerous on me. And then the solution ended up being, okay, well, you go and study and write from home for 3 months. And then after that, the solution was, okay, we'll put you in this new isolated lab space. And it was just one of those things where I felt like I was already compromising. And then I was told to compromise even more and accommodate someone who showed no willingness to do that for me. And obviously, like, that's what needed to be done in the sense of like being in opposition to someone who's not willing to move at all. But at no point did I feel like my supervisor had, like, it very much was like, what's the easiest solution? And the easiest solution is that Haley, because she's accommodating, will make these choices. Around the same time, a newer lab member had somewhat plagiarized writing of mine, and we'd had some discussions about it, and then it happened again. And I was like, what is like, this is not okay. And kind of like it was just brushed aside by my supervisor. And I like tweeted, obviously not naming anyone but I like put on social media just like, oh, this happened, I'm upset about it. And someone like in my field was like, hey, that really sucks. And it was so gratifying to hear from an outside perspective that, yeah, this is wrong, as opposed to like, oh, maybe this is just, maybe I'm wrong. And so I had the relationship with my supervisor where I could sit and like have it out with them, but it took time, like it took conversation and it took time, and I'm still not at the place that I was with this person that I was at the beginning of our relationship. And so, and that's also because I initiated that. Like your supervisors are inherently mentors throughout your career because that's a structure of academia. And so you also have to, oh, sorry, Annie, you have a question? No, okay.
You please continue.
So having to sort of, come up with the fortitude to do that is something that I learned that I don't ever want to put one of my trainees in that situation. And so if I notice that, like, I try to either notice that something is amiss or or create an environment. So as mentors, and particularly supervisor mentor relationships, because I think there's a lot of different ways we can be mentors, and that structure looks different depending on where we are. But when you're directly supervising a person, making sure that you're in a space to receive feedback about your mentorship and how improving situations and improving workplaces is very important and necessary. And then to kind of like, I start with the bad and then maybe pivot to a better story, so it's not all doom and gloom. So right now I'm on the job market, and I've had a few interviews, and it's my first year, so I'm kind of just feeling it out, and I haven't had any offers, which is not a problem. But I love feedback. I love the study of feedback. I love receiving feedback. And so it's been really great that at these different institutions that I have been interviewing at, multiple like people at each of them have been willing and taken the time to give me feedback about my job talk, my structure of, my research program. And these are people who like I did not know necessarily before like the interview process. And so thinking about mentorship also can be like you can get like little bits of mentoring, like these flash in a pan, and maybe they can build towards a like future mentee-mentee relationship. But just thinking about even these little conversations we can have with a person that can be so fruitful for their future career or life prospects, I think is something we have to keep in mind, and I know has been very helpful for me this year as I navigate this process.
Thanks a lot, Haley, for sharing this. And I think I said from all the panelists, we are sorry to hear that that happens to you. Yeah, I think Annie has something to say on this topic, please.
Yeah, I actually just wanted to follow up with some of the, some of the things that we mentioned. I think this, that experience kind of highlights the importance of having multiple mentors, right? Having kind of a village of people, and not just mentors in a sense, but also people like, that you are at the very kind of the same career stage within your institution, outside of your institution, because it kind of gives you a sanity check. And you're like, okay, this experience happened to me. I feel like it was a microaggression. I am not sure, right? Like, so it makes you actually check in and say, I don't think this is, what is expected. This doesn't feel right, right? This doesn't, and I think academia could be very isolating. We tend to be in very small programs. And then if you are, thinking about all your different identities, you may feel very isolated. We move from where we're, grew up in or where we live. We're very different cities, sometimes countries, right? So understanding that because of the isolation, I think we want to make sure that you are having kind of a very wide network of people who you could confide in, who you could check in and say, this happened to me. I actually can we talk about it? I'm not sure how to address it, because it's not going to just be solely your mentor, right? And I think there was a comment in the chat about what happens if the mentor you have as a mentee is not the right mentor for you, right? And I think this is why it's so important to have different mentors, because those other mentors who may be at the same kind of career professional setting as your main mentor could actually help you navigate, help you figure out what's going on. And if you are in a formal program where you have to switch labs, for example, right? I mean, ideally, programs should have a committee that takes care of that to make sure that the well-being of the student is priority, and that they are put into a different lab and so forth. If it's not a formal mentorship relationship, then that's where the other mentors can kind of help you navigate and figure things out. And another thing that I kind of wanted to mention is that in this process, yes, mentors are not perfect. And that's why we talk about how to shop around for a therapist. You may actually have to shop around for your different mentors at different points of your career, because your needs are going to change throughout your career. But you also want to make sure that you are not jeopardizing your well-being because you are with someone who's maybe well known in their field, and this is going to be career advancement. And so kind of making sure that you have that network of people that you could confide in and check in to make sure that the things that are happening, that you have a sounding board, and this is not, you're not making this up. If it didn't feel right, it's for a reason. So definitely highly recommend to have multiple people in your life, whether it's family members, friends, colleagues, who are there for you for that specific purpose.
Thanks a lot for sharing that. Andrea, I think you also would like to add something to this, please.
Yeah, and just to further a point that Haley was making, which is around sort of the obligations for conformity. I had an experience that was a very positive illustration of mentoring across the philosophical divide. And this was back when I was a graduate student, like 150 years ago now. So like for 1996 to 1999, that's when I did my graduate degree. So this is a while ago yet, long before sort of, many of these issues that we're discussing today were part of the discourse and lexicon, right? So I'm philosophically plant-based and have been since college days. And my graduate supervisor happened to be a Midwestern Republican who was a hunter. And so you can imagine, right, there's a potential there for some philosophical disagreements. And she had this particular type of felt pen that she really loved, right? It was a particular type. And I got one in the mail one day from PETA, because I was a member of PETA. And People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, right? A very potentially inflammatory in some camps, animal justice and animal rights advocacy organization. And so I brought it in. I was very excited because, and then she took one look at it and said PETA right on it. And so she, in her world, that would be something that would be far too much of a scarlet letter to have on her person. She put a little piece of tape over the PETA, but still used the pen. And again, it was at that moment just recognizing that you can have two individuals who are philosophically on the polar opposite end of the spectrum and still have a productive and collaborative professional relationship and even a personal relationship. She ended up being a very good friend of mine in these years to come. Provided lots of wonderful opportunities for me, was always a very big sponsor of mine, and in fact ended up being an advocate. When I was a TA in the physiology laboratory, I was excused from having to euthanize animals for the purpose of experimentation. And she was my advocate in that in that space, right? Which is a true demonstration of solidarity with your mentee, even if philosophically you're not on the same end of the spectrum as them. So just wanted to follow that up because that was a very illuminating experience for me. And again, something that I wish more in society would take to heart as we see all of the discord that's happening, you know, here and essentially globally, right?
Thank you. Thanks a lot also for sharing this and for bringing up that point. If we go further with our discussion, maybe such a question, how would you start or approach the mentor-mentee relationship so that it can benefit also for mentee, for the mental health of mentee? Will you give maybe some tips or your experience? If you'd like, Andrea, I think you also would like to start on that.
Sorry, yes, I don't want to hog the floor here, but yes, so, you know, again, I think everybody around the table will recognize that the most othering experiences that we encounter during our training and professional lives are those that end up eroding our mental health the most. You know, the word microaggressions has come up. These are ubiquitous. You know, the need to conform to a specific model and approve specific types of academic currency, even if your passions are authentically aligned elsewhere, right? The devaluing of community-based and sort of patient-centered research, right? The basic sciences are those that are very heavily funded, as we all know, and you know, our big granting agencies like CIHR, the NIH, and CERC, right? These are these funds preferentially support you know, basic sciences in general in our fields. So, you know, all of these realities work to erode our own well-being and sense of belonging, as has been mentioned, right? So I think really ensuring that we are offering a range of opportunities that individual mentees can accept or decline as their interests and as their time permits. I've heard other PIs state categorically they will never take summer students, or they won't do this, that, or the other thing, and that rigidity ends up excluding people from their trainee talent pool. So really recognizing that the mentee ultimately will understand what the mentee has to offer. And we run into, you know, challenges with mental health and the pressure to perform and conform when we are inflexible and adherent to status quo. So again, recruiting for skills, recruiting for attributes, having clearly established boundaries and expectations, right? If we don't a priori define what the boundaries are, then it's up to the individual mentee's imagination, and usually the stories that we tell ourselves in our own heads are often worse. You know, especially if we've come from a place where our amygdala has been driving or steering the ship rather than our executive functioning, right? So trauma survivorship in particular, right? So having that wherewithal to kindly establish boundaries and expectations is going to be most likely a relief, right? Boundaries are kind and generous. They're not exclusionary, right? They establish what's permissible and what isn't, and what's acceptable. And you know, again, it it just puts a guardrail up a little bit around that sort of the imaginoscope that ends up being deployed. You know, and again, like I said before, demystifying conversations around challenges, like being transparent about the challenges that I have had on my pathway to medicine. You know, many of the experiences that I have had will resonate with others, and so just being open and honest about it, and being again, those expressions of solidarity and expressions of active sponsorship, and seeing individuals for who they are, that builds that trust and enables you to become a sounding board in the event that your mentee encounters some challenges or barriers, or again, microaggressions, instances of frank othering, right? That would need you to sort of weigh in to help them navigate. And then again, the final thing is, you know, speaking truth to power. That is, again, something that I'm very passionate about. And again, just being transparent about the risks of doing that, and understanding that there are repercussions potentially to that. You know, and then again, the final thing I would say about that, to foster sort of mental health and safety within your in my case, research and clinical spaces, is really understanding the goals of your student. As we've heard around the table, so often people are trying to please their superiors, right? And think that they know what their superiors are going to want or need out of them. And people are sort of we're attaching our own values and expectations onto others. And that erodes away your mentee's authenticity, right? That they're unable to really conform to their own authentic passions and interests. That is going to be a tax on their mental health, because it's a dissonance, right? And so really understanding the short-term and the long-term goals of your mentees is going to help you become a more effective mentor.
Thanks lots for sharing that. It's actually very interesting what you said regarding the boundaries and expectations, and it actually goes for both parties, right? And it brings the self-awareness before you're going into mentor-mentee relationship, or actually any relationship. It's good to understand what are you willing to give, what you would like to receive, and actually to understand that, yeah, first for yourself, and then state it clearly for a mentee or for a mentor. That is, yeah, I think we all be there when we were not sure what actually we want, or where are our boundaries laying.
I mean, boundaries will help you position yourself to sponsor your training, right? One example I have is like reference letters, for example. I need at least 2 weeks notice, and in very heavy periods of work, 4 weeks better. So, you know, you want to help your students help you sponsor them, right? And so just establishing things like that, just very clear, you know, expectations around communications. You know, if you yourself as the mentor have blackout periods where you can't respond to text or email, right? Being transparent about that, right? Some individuals are real night owls, right? And others are prefer to work in the morning. People are introverted versus extroverted. So having that self-awareness, like, am I an introvert or an extrovert? Introverts, remember, find social interactions exhausting after a period of time, and therefore need to retreat. And so that retreat might be misinterpreted by a mentee, right, as withdrawal from them. And it might just literally be that your mentor is an introvert and they need to refill that tank alone by themselves. And remember, we live in an extroverts world. About 2/3 of the population are estimated to be extroverts. So chances are you're more likely to encounter extroverts. Professional life, and we all know that some of those qualities that are attached to extroverted personalities have been quite adaptive in leadership roles, and again, sort of perpetuating certain structures that are encountered in science. So just, again, having that self-awareness and being able to communicate those boundaries is,
Yeah.
it helps you place your students on the trajectory or the pathway to success in sponsorship.
Yeah, that is very true. Thanks. And I think Melanie Ann at in the chat also they linked to there. Does anyone has anything to share, also to add on this topic? Yeah, Annie, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of not add, but just really kind of emphasize the point that Andrew was making in terms of as a mentor, having those boundaries and having kind of being able to communicate expectations, because I think we have to keep in mind that we're going to be working with a lot of students who may be first generation, who may be, come from a different cultural backgrounds, cultural values, right? And these are social relationships, right? So being very clear about some of those expectations would facilitate kind of a relationship to thrive, right? So for example, even something as simple as showing your mentee how to write an email. There are some things that because we've been so far along in our career, that we may forget that perhaps someone not actually provided guidance of how to do that, right? So like also thinking about some of those very soft skills that students may actually need some guidance on, particularly students who are non-traditional, first generation, all these cultural differences. Because when they go out in the world to interact with other people in academia, we're actually helping them, kind of setting them up for success. Yeah, I agreed. I usually give my mentors a whole entire month for writing a letter of recommendation, right? Or if I want someone to review some sort of document, giving them ample time, right? So having all these expectations outlined is actually training. It's not just mentorship, it's training, because then the students are going to take that and are going to be more successful. But kind of expecting for students to know this without understanding that we're not taught this in classes, right? This is kind of skills that you learn as you go along. The earlier you teach them, the earlier you provide that guidance, those expectations, those boundaries, the more successful that student is going to be. And it just kind of makes the relationship a lot, a healthier relationship. We know that stress just makes everyone just not be at their best, right? So if you have a lot of deadlines, so for example, let's plan ahead, right? Let's meet, I tell students, have multiple meetings throughout the year where you sit down with your mentor. These are the things you want to accomplish. These are the deadlines that are coming up. And, I want to submit this grant, this scholarship. There is some requirements for reviewing, research papers. I need letters of recommendations. Can you, so really be having that open communication, because mentors are going to be quite busy, right? They have other responsibilities, right? Oftentimes mentors don't get paid for mentorship. It might not even be part of the responsibilities in their kind of faculty portfolio, right? When they go for promotion. But they do it because they want to, and it's really important for them to train the next generation. And one thing, I know there may be people who may be transitioning to themselves being mentors. One of the advice that I was giving is those first few years of your first job are really important, because you're going to have to be applying for grants. You're probably going to be teaching courses that you may have to develop them from scratch. You're going to be quite busy, and your promotion clock is ticking, right? So being very cautious about how many students you take in the beginning, because one, you want to make sure that you have the time to mentor students and really address their needs, but you also want to make sure that it's not impacting your own career development, because you're still really early career, you yourself are still a mentee. So we want to make sure that we're finding a very great balance between being a mentor who's present, who has the time, but also is not someone who's not going to be present because, halfway through the year, you realize you're teaching 3 courses, you have all these responsibility, you got to submit grants, you have to submit, your portfolio. So just being very cautious about that to make sure that we are being present, addressing the needs of our mentees, but also making sure that we ourselves as mentors, regardless of our stage of our career, are making sure we're have a well-funded lab and so forth. So I just wanted to add that because I thought that was very, very important to address.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It actually goes back to self-awareness of a mentor, how much he or she can spend time, how much he or she energy has. It all goes in the same, and being open about the time that we can dedicate to that work particular. Yeah, exactly. Hayley, you have something also to add. Please
Yeah,
feel
just
free.
and just thinking about different people are going to know that it's okay to seek out mentorship differently. And you're going to encounter mentees who ask for what they need. And then you're going to have people who don't think they can ask people for things. And so setting yourself up to show that it's okay it's part of that boundary setting of like what can be asked for, and then also encouraging people that you could or who might need your mentorship or who are in a place, where you should be the one mentoring them, to utilize that, particularly for people who might not feel like that is something they can do. It's hard. Like I'm still like it's sometimes like pulling teeth sometimes with some of my mentees to be like, you can ask us for help. Like, what can we do? Here are things. And so just being mindful to create these environments where it is both part of that boundary setting is letting people know that they can do that, and then also providing that in different contexts or ways where students maybe don't feel like they're taking too much or mentees don't feel like they're taking too much of you, I think can help, particularly for students who are unfamiliar that this is okay or who are in different levels of potential crises. So I just wanted to add and kind of this, I think that kind of bookends what we were talking about in the stream.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually a very good point, because sometimes the mentee, they may not be afraid to ask, but sometimes they don't really know what to ask or how to formulate, or what to do if they want to achieve like the goal. They don't know where to start, and this is again, you need that help.
And like offering the opportunities instead of having a student come to you and be like, oh, I want to learn this. And so being like, why don't we learn? Like I saw someone post like how to review a peer review manuscript. So it's like, why don't we go through that as part of like, this curriculum can be helpful, and then create that relationship where then students are able to ask more because you've established that, this is how you mentor, this is the safe space, this is etc.
Yeah, fully agree. Melanie, Anne, you have something also to add, please.
Yeah, very briefly, that's why it's important to, when you're seeking that professional development, both formal and informal, to either, maybe some words I might use are looking for opportunities that have a lens, either a trauma-informed lens or a cultural humility lens or an intercultural lens, because in case folks are wondering, why wouldn't you like ask for help? I think somebody said here, like some mentee might be unfamiliar with the concept that it's okay to ask for help. And so I think that most of us know that it's okay to ask for help, but maybe you don't want to be okay. Maybe you want to be a person who isn't blocked from future opportunities because you asked for help that one time. And so just like I wrote in the chat about your identity, or sorry, a supervisor's identity being feeling like it's at threat when they are faced with the challenge. It is the same and even more because of a power differential when it is the mentee who is faced with a challenge. And so even though it seems so innocent, oh, just ask for help, or to say something like, I'm always here for you if you need it, you have to understand that sometimes they don't, because they are very aware of the consequences of that downstream. So maybe they do want to be just like you, but they've never seen you ask for help. and therefore they're never going to ask for help either because they are actually following in your footsteps, right? Or maybe they also want to be like you, but they have identities, more, for example, more marginalized identities that you may have. And so they've always been taught, and it's been proven to them that, when they can't actually perform the same behaviors that you do, for example, asking for help, because it reflects badly, right, on them. So for you, asking for help means you are a very open person. For that person, asking for help means that they're not competent and they shouldn't have been admitted to the program, or they shouldn't have received that job offer. And then the second thing I'll say is, from my experience now being a supervisor, because of that experience, from day one was always like telling my I'd love to help you. Every meeting would be, oh, and how can I support that? And at this new role, they were very threatened by that. They had no idea, who is this person, because I'm also a strengths coach by training. Why is she always asking how she can support me? And what I realized months and months later, after developing a trusting supervisor relationship, was that what they were hearing is, you must not be competent, which is why I'm here now. So, what part of your job are you not really able to do? And that, from my experience, I can do better and help you with. And so that's because for some people, they've had experiences with micromanaging, right? Where micromanaging is disguised as helping. And so, like I said, when you have that intercultural lens to what these very simple and, neutral behaviors look like, then you get more insight into why someone may not be acting the way that you expect, or even that you decided together that you would, how you would.
Yeah, for sure. It's absolutely. It's also, I see in the international environment that every action is seen differently in every culture, and that is sometimes difficult to align with the other team members, how you should talk, how you should ask for help, how you even should make jokes and everything like this. We have just a minute for the last question. And Andrea, you would like to add something?
Yeah, and I just wanted to again echo the sentiments of Melanie and Haley and Annie. Again, every mentee is going to bring their own lived experience to the table, and that lived experience might have involved a long history of walking a very thin line without facing reprisal, and they might not feel worthy or empowered enough to impose. There is going to be some of your mentees will have significant imposter syndrome, as we've heard, inferiority, feelings of inferiority, feelings of not belonging, and therefore are just trying not to be placed in a box. They might have been tone policed, right? Or interacting with individuals in the past who don't share their social location, right? So again, just having that open-mindedness and that understanding of how communication styles will differ across all of the strata of social location. I see this as one example is mentees using a first name, for example, with a PI. That is one I hear a lot. Some people take great umbrage to, being addressed by their first name. And really, in many cultures, it would be, overly formal to address, someone who is really in a very close mentee-mentor relationship by anything other than their first name, right? Or, in many cultures, it's so common to just pick up the cell and call someone, right? And I've heard, it's awfully empowered to be calling up the dean of blah, 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 right? So these, this understanding that everyone comes to the table with their own lived experience, and that differs, as we've heard, across social locations, and, sort of checking our own privileges when we encounter somebody who is engaging with us in a way that other trainees perhaps have not. But again, just also recognizing you know, that this, oh, why didn't you come forward sooner? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? That's all going to be determined by one's own sense of safety and knowledge of what repercussions might be coming down the pipe. And again, just the understanding that those who are marginalized by their social location will have necessarily been walking a much thinner line than those who are more empowered.
Yeah, that is also very true. And what I found helpful for me is observe, like also to how people react when you're also in this intercultural communication. So you you just see how the people behave, and you try to ask. So I saw that you did like this, you said like this, you looked like this. What happened actually here? And that again opens this transparency and the partnership relation. I think now it's time to move to the questions from the audience. So I would like to ask if there is any questions, and maybe feel free just to raise a hand so we can see you first in the screen, and just unmute yourself. Let's have a conversation. I saw there was a lot of messages in the chat. I did not follow all of them. But also, if anyone who already like wrote in the chat would like to bring it up and to say in words, it would be super cool.
We're just on it. We're on the chat. We're answering them.
Yeah,
That's why.
me too, me too. I'm trying to follow through all the discussions. There's very vivid conversation. Lucia, could you just unmute yourself and say?
I'm really sorry if someone already mentioned this and I missed it, but I've been to a few usually mandatory like intercultural trainings in universities, and they're always like well-meaning but quite strange and probably more offensive than helpful ultimately. And I wondered if any of you seen a good version of this. Because like as somebody just commented, it's not about like learning the quirks of specific cultures, but about learning the skills to not have it be a problem that people are from different cultures. And
Yeah, so
I'm just
maybe
curious.
I can repeat. So yes, I became an intercultural trainer because I also didn't like the way that other people were doing it. So I'll repeat because I just realized that if you're watching this on YouTube, you can't see the chat. So I'll just literally repeat. So hello, YouTube audience. If you are watching this and you're a mentor and you want to do the right thing and you're feeling extremely overwhelmed because all these people keep talking about all these situations that make you more and more confused about what your next step is. Now I'll read what I wrote. If you're feeling overwhelmed, remember, your job is not to become an expert of every single culture or every single mentorship strategy, okay? It's impossible. Plus, people actually hate to be stereotyped, which I think is what you're talking about, where you're saying like, sometimes when you even hear something about one of your own identities, you say, oh, please don't assume that that's me, or, or please don't, or maybe you just want to go in a different direction. Maybe that has been me, and now I'm looking for something else. And so what your job is, actually, I think what our job is as humans, is to recognize when something is not going as planned and to use curiosity and open communication to figure out at least two things with the mentee, like what might be going on, what might be going on, and what next steps can be. And Andrew has added to that, assume positive intent and be curious.
Anyone wants to add something to this before we jump to the next question? Just more thoughts on this topic?
So would the takeaway kind of be to let your mentee know that if you're like, let's say, ignorant of something that's culturally significant to them or their habits, that they can bring it up as a subject?
Yeah, I have, so there's a book by Minda Harts called Right Within. It's very much more about white collar workplace. But there's something at the end called the manager's pledge. And that I think could help a lot of folks. So again, if you're watching on YouTube, you can Google manager's pledge Minda Harts and you'll be able to find it. And I'll put it in the chat for folks who are here.
Cool. Thanks a lot. Sasha?
Amy also had her hand up. I don't know if she wanted to add to the previous question. No. Yeah, thank you so much. I kind of have this maybe question of, first of all, maybe seeking mentorship and also not getting overwhelmed with being the mentor. And I think like a lot of people in this panel probably would relate to a degree to experience I've had, but I feel like people who do come from a very outside of academia kind of journey, like they're either first gen or they're newcomers, they have to learn these things from scratch. They tend to emphasize more with people who also go through the similar situation. And I feel like we take on a lot of these duties and like seeing these people. And I think sometimes I feel like I found this way of like mentoring others as also a way to mentor myself in a way. And I was kind of curious, like, how do you not overwhelm yourself with those duties, but also like find really great mentorship elsewhere? Like, how do you balance these things?
I would like to take this question. Annie?
Yeah, I get that. And I think, Tasha, what you're describing, there's multiple terms. So one of them is like the minority tax, right? We tend to, when we are part, we're one of few or the only one, right? We tend to try to take on because otherwise no one else is going to mentor that student from that other background. And oftentimes it might be the only mentor who's first generation or the other person of color in that department takes on all the students who are, because what's happening is the student body is becoming more diverse, but at the faculty level is still not as diverse, right? So oftentimes that person, and then that person might actually be early career, is the one who is asked to be on committees, diversity committees, who is, asked to work with these students and so forth. So it could quickly become overwhelming and what that mentor is being asked to do, right? But I think this goes back to what we mentioned earlier about having a team of mentors, right? Oftentimes granting organizations, so take the National Institute of Health here in the US, you have to, or a student applies for a fellowship, they have to put together a sponsoring team, a mentoring team that is not just going to address different needs when it comes to the research or the clinical work, but also different needs that student may have. So in that sense, it's like we're not expecting for one person to be able to provide every aspect, every need that student has. It's going to take a team, right? And that's for a mentor as well. When you feel a little bit overwhelmed, you could think of, okay, you know what, this is probably not my area of expertise. I don't have life experience in this area, but I do know someone who actually identifies this way or who may be able to provide, let me connect you with that person, right? So that's kind of like how we could offset as mentors a lot of that responsibilities. And then in terms of looking for mentorship, Twitter is a great example, or X, I don't know if they've changed the name, is a great example of actually connecting with people. Oftentimes, people are very open to meeting over Zoom for 30 minutes, for an hour, and having more informal mentoring relationships. That happens. I have students reach out to me all the time, and I'm very open to meeting. So that's one of the ways you could have formal mentorship relationship, but also informal, where you meet at conferences, for example, and grab coffee, or over Twitter and so forth. So kind of be open that the mentor relationships are going to look very different, but that gives you the opportunity to actually reach out and not think that it's going to be, the mentor feels like it's going to be huge expectations. It could just be informal, call emailing, and so forth.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I just want to quickly add that before before you connect a mentee with somebody who shares a particular identity, ask the question, you know, is that what you're looking for? Just because sometimes what can happen is that it's not what they're looking for at all. They're actually looking for you to grow in the area. And so that's a great, again, a great curious and human conversation to have. Because like I said, you know, you're never going to know every identity. And if you do, you still have it wrong anyway, because you're just assuming too much and people grow and change. And so having that conversation is really important before connecting them.
Thank you.
I was going to say something very similar, that I think as people with many different identities, we do want some of our mentors, some of that relationship to be people who share some of these identities. But also that doesn't mean that we can't mentor people who, and can't be great mentors to people who are who we don't overlap completely across these identities and marginalizations. And it is also incumbent on us who have some marginalizations but have privileges and other things to do that work, and also call in our colleagues who are not doing that. One, because we know that the burden of mentorship, internal mentorship in academic institutions, in organizations, falls primarily on women, and that burden among women is not shared equally across all women. And so one, we need to make sure that all of our colleagues, and particularly when we think about the construction of departments, are doing that. And it can sound so crass to be like documenting that. But if you're meeting with students, it doesn't have to be like, put that in your calendar every, you know, like your bi-yearly meeting with your department head, your dean. Say like, these are the number of hours that I have spent mentoring students in the department. And this is going above and beyond my service amount of like service dedication in my contract. And I need to have this recognized on like tenure and merit committees, and I need you to go to bat for me for that. And also we need to discuss that culture in the department of how that's, you know, how we need to all be better at that. We need to be able to successfully like all of our mentees should be able to go to almost anyone in the department and get mentorship from them. And oftentimes we with marginalized identities are often asked to find commonality in the sort of status quo, which are older, cis, straight, white men, and ask for the reverse, to have people who make up the predominant of the department, make them do the reverse as well. If we're expected to find commonality with these people, they need to be able to find commonality with our mentees, with our students. And so pushing and taking, I think we talked about like how this looks different for different people, pushing for this. And so if you have privilege in that regard, using it then to improve the department in that regard, I think can be nice, helpful, because then it's also not like one person in the department is taking on all that extra mentoring because they might share an identity with the students who want that affiliative identity mentorship relationship. And not that that's not important and can't be. And I think, as Melanie Ann said, it's like, is that what they want? Or do they feel like that's the safe person to go to? And so how can we change departments in that regard? But I think also, like, I don't know, like I don't have good boundaries in this regard. Like I give a lot to my mentees and will take on mentees. So I think I think it's having your mentor then be like, you got time for that? Is that okay? Like, what can we do? And then also just thinking about who you can connect them to, what resources you can connect them to can help, not offload, but kind of like, maybe you're not the best person to do all of it, but you're the best person to talk to them and be like, here's where you need to go. You can't solve everything, but I think it just comes with practice. And so I think when you're starting like your graduate school journey, your academic journey, not trying to solve it all at once, but one at a time, like one person at a time, until you kind of learn like, okay, this is what I'm doing, this is what it takes. And then how can I, as I'm balancing all the things I do, how much more can I give in that regard where I'm still taking care of myself and my mental health? But I acknowledge that it is a hard and delicate balance to mentor many people.
Yeah, I guess we've all been there. We're still there. That we give a lot to our mentees because we just like the reward, or at least for me, I just like the rewards, how it goes, and to be part of the success. That is, for me, it's very important. And I also wanted to add to what Haley just said, that it's not a role of mentor to know all the answers, right? We don't need to do that. And it's actually fun to discover something together with mentee and to learn something together with them and to have this collaborative, environment, and to show them that it's okay not to know something. That's it. You show it by an example. So to ask help and to learn something together. I think we don't have any more time for questions. I would advise, if there is still some questions, you can post them in the chat and then share among the panelists, and we can reply it in the written form if there is something else. And on this, I also would like to thank all the panelists for sharing their experience and talking to us, and giving so much piece of advice. And for the audience, for being so active in the chat. still messages appearing. It's so cool to see all the activity and interest in this topic. And I hope all together we could help the next generation to be as they want to be.